friends, welcome to the point. So in this session, we'll be discussing about India-Israel relations. So India-Israel relations, or it is also called as Indian-Israeli relations or Indo-Israeli relations. It refers to the bilateral relations between India and Israel. So the two countries, they have an extensive economic, military and strategic relationship. Israel is represented through an embassy in New Delhi and one consulate each in Mumbai and Bengaluru. So India is represented through its embassy in Tel Aviv. So India is the largest buyer of Israeli military equipment, and Israel is the second largest defense supplier to India after Russia. So from 1999 to 2009, the military business between the two nations was worth of around $9 billion. So military and strategic ties between the two nations, it extended to intelligence sharing on terrorist groups and joint military training. And as of 2014, India is the third largest Asian trade partner of Israel and the 10th largest trade partner overall. In 2014, bilateral trade excluding military sales, it stood at $4.52 billion, and the relations further expanded during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's administration, with India abstaining from voting against Israel in the United Nations in several resolutions. As of now, 2015, the two nations are negotiating an extensive bilateral free trade agreement focusing on areas such as information technology, biotechnology and agriculture. So according to an international poll conducted in 2009, 58% of Indians they expressed sympathy with Israel compared with 56% of Americans. So talking about the ancient relations between India and Israel, excavations at Tel Megiddo, it shows the evidences of Indo-Mediterranean trade relations from mid-2nd millennium BCE between South Asia and southern Levant, as they prove presence of turmeric, banana, sesame, all originating from South Asia. So this Tel Megiddo, it is the site of ancient city of Megiddo, the remains of which form a tell that is situated in northern Israel near Kibbutz Megiddo, about 30 kilometers southeast of Haifa. Megiddo, it is known for its historical, geographical and theological importance, especially under its Greek name called Armageddon. So during the Bronze Age, Megiddo was an important Canaanite city-state, and during the Iron Age, a royal city in the Kingdom of Israel. The geographical analysis of Israel suggests that the authors of Old Testament were talking about India, where the trade of animals such as monkeys and peacocks existed. So according to Chaim Manchem Rabin, the connection between the ancient Israel and the Indian subcontinent was recorded during the reign of King Solomon. And ancient trade and cultural communications between India and Levant is documented in Periplus of the Erythraean Sea and the accounts surrounding Queen of Sheba in the Hebrew Bible. So the trade relations of both communities can be tracked back to 1000 BCE and earlier to the times of the Indus Valley civilization of the Indian subcontinent and the Babylonian culture of Middle East. A Buddhist story describes Indian merchants visiting Baveru, that is Babylonia, and selling peacocks for public display. So similar earlier accounts describe monkeys exhibited to the public. Trade connections between India and Palestine and the Mediterranean Jewish communities continued, and later the languages of these cultures it started to share linguistic similarities. Judea played a minor role in trade between the Roman Empire and the India during the period of Roman rule in Judea, and it is known that There were expensive garments in the temple in Jerusalem imported from India via Alexandria. So, non-recognition in the year 1948 to 1950. India's position on establishment of the State of Israel was affected by many factors, including India's own partition on religious lines and India's relationship with other nations. So, Indian independence leader Mahatma Gandhi believed that Jews had a good case and a prior claim for Israel, but opposed the creation of Israel on religious or mandated the terms. So Gandhi believed that the Arabs were the rightful occupants of Palestine and was of the view that the Jews should return to their country of origin. India voted against the partitioning of Palestine plan of 1947 and it voted against Israel's admission to the United Nations in 1949. Various proponents of Hindu nationalism supported or sympathized with the creation of Israel. And the Hindu Mahasabha leader Vinayak Damodar Sarwar, he supported the creation of Israel on both moral and political grounds and condemned India's vote at the UN against Israel. Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh leader Madhav Sadashiva Golwar, he admired Jewish nationalism and believed Palestine was the natural territory of Jewish people, essential to their aspiration for nationhood. Informal Recognition 1950-51. So on 17th September 1950, India officially recognized the State of Israel. Following India's recognition of Israel, and Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru stated, "We would have recognized Israel long ago because Israel is a fact. We refrained because of our desire not to offend the sentiments of our friends in the Arab countries." So, in the year 1953, Israel was permitted to open a consulate in Bombay, which is now called as Mumbai. However, Nehru government did not want to pursue full diplomatic relation with Israel as it supported Palestine cause, and it believed that permitting Israel to open an embassy in New Delhi, it would damage the relations with Arab world. From India's recognition of Israel in 1950 to early 1990s, the relationship remained informal in nature, and India's opposition to official diplomatic relation with Israel, it stemmed from both domestic and foreign consideration. Domestically, politicians in India feared losing the Muslim vote in relation were normalized with Israel. Additionally, India did not want to jeopardize the large amount of its citizens with Arab states of the Persian Gulf, who were helping India maintain its foreign exchange reserves. And India's domestic needs for energy was another reason for lack of normalization of ties with Israel in terms of safeguarding the flow of oil from Arabs. That is from the Arab nations. And India's foreign policy goals and alliances also proved problematic to formal relations with Israel, including India's support for the pro-Palestine Liberation Organization non-aligned movement, and India's tilt towards the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and India's desire to counter Pakistan influence with the Arab states on an ideological level. The dominant political party in India during this era, namely the Indian National Congress, it opposed Israel due to their perception and that it was the state based on religion analogous to Pakistan. Although there was no formal relationship for several decades, meetings and cooperation took place between both countries, including figures such as Moshe Dayan. Israel also provided India with crucial information during its multiple wars. Rapprochement 1992 to present. So, after the decades of non-aligned and pro-Arab policy, India formally established relations with Israel when it opened an embassy in Tel Aviv in January 1992. The ties between the two nations, they have flourished since, primarily due to common strategic interest and security threats. The formation of Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which allegedly neglected the sentiments of Indian Muslims, and the blocking of India by Pakistan from joining the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They are considered to be the cause of this diplomatic shift. On a diplomatic level, both the countries have managed to maintain healthy relations despite India's strong condemnation of Israeli military actions in the Palestinian territories, which are believed by the analysts to be motivated by the United Progressive Alliance government desire for the Muslim votes in India. So, at the height of the tension between the Israel and the Hamas in July 2014, India offered a rhetorical condemnation, holding both sides responsible for erupting violence, and asked Israel to stop disproportionate use of force in Gaza, which was read by many as departure from tradition of more vocal supports for the Palestine cause. And External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj insisted that there is absolutely no change in India's policy towards Palestine, which is that we fully support the Palestine cause while maintaining good relations with Israel. So, clarifying current position on the issue, while that might sound to some like fence sitting, it is a policy shared by all governments over the past 20 years following the establishment of formal diplomatic relations in 1992. Swaraj, a seasoned parliamentarian, had herself blocked the opposition demand in Rajya Sabha for passing a resolution condemning Israel for 2014 Israel-Gaza conflict by saying that India has friendly relations with both Israel and Palestine, and therefore any such move may impact its friendship negatively. So, although later in a symbolic gesture, India joined other BRICS nations. It joined other BRICS nations in voting at United Nations Human Rights Council for a probe into the alleged human rights violation in Gaza, which generated mixed response among media and analysts in India. So, when the United Nations Human Rights Council report alleging the Israel had committed war crime was tabled for vote, India abstained from voting, one of the 5 countries to do so, and 41 nations voted in favor, and the United Nations was the only vote against. Israel envoy to India, Daniel Carman, thanked India for not supporting what he described as another anti-Israel bashing resolution. So, India-Israel relationship has been very close and warm under the premiership of Narendra Modi since 2014, and in 2017 he was the first ever prime minister to visit Israel, and India was the largest arms customer of Israel in 2017. Defense relations between the two countries are long standing, and India voted in the favor of Israel's resolution to deny observer status to Palestinian non-governmental organization shared at the United Nations Economic United Nations Economic and Social Council on June 6, 2019. So, in the next session, let's discuss about the diplomatic visits in between both the countries of India and Israel, and so on. Thank you.